My name is Gavin Evans, and this is my review for Game of Thrones Season 8, and there'll be spoilers. Like I said, I knew it was coming. It just doesn't lessen the blow. Like, the first four seasons of this show are so perfect and incredible, and just for this last season to be complete shit. Like the White Walkers, they were built up to over this entire show, and that was the payoff. Oh my goodness. Let's begin talking about the few positives I do have for this season. And one thing I've consistently liked during this entire show is Theon Greyjoy's character. I think they've handled him very well, and I think that scene where him and Sansa reunite is actually a very nice moment. And I like the fact how he actually picks a side and how he dies until his dying breath to defend Bronn. And I actually feel like he's one character who went out in a way that added to his character arc throughout this entire show, and I found that to be satisfying, especially since Bran gives him that tiny bit of recognition just before he dies. I love that. There's one scene where Sansa and Tyrion are talking, and he's she's just like, Joffrey's wedding wasn't that bad. It had its moments. I thought that was a funny line. But then she says to Tyrion, I used to think you were the cleverest man alive. And it's just like, did she just break the fourth wall there? So did we. And I do like the last scene between Arya and the Hound. I thought it was a very nice moment. That's where my positives end. Where do we even begin? I'm going to structure this review a bit differently. Usually I go through all these different plots and then the characters, but because everything's so interconnected here, I'm just going to break it apart episode by episode. Now, I didn't decide to do this until episode 3, so episodes 1 and 2 might have a little bit of each in both ways. I use the best of my memory to do it, but let's just get into it. Episode 1. Jon and Daenerys come back to Winterfell shockingly fast. I remember when it took days to get anywhere, but now it just seems like people can just teleport. But I was waiting for Jon to reunite with his family. Him and Sansa give each other a nice hug, and then he reunites with Bran, and Bran just says something that ruins the moment. But then Jon finally gets to reunite with Arya. And this should have been such an emotional, impactful moment, and I just felt nothing. Not an ounce of emotion, and then he just goes ahead and talks shit about Sansa. And then Jon just won't shut up about the Queen. Like, he was the king of the North. He owned it. Everybody wanted him to be in that position. And he just gives it up for some fucking broad he just met. The romance between Daenerys and Jon is still awful. There's not an ounce of chemistry. And when they kiss and the dragons watch them, I thought it was very cringy. Reminded me of Shrek in some ways. But then everybody gets mad that Daenerys killed Sam's brother and Sam's dad. And it's just like, well, what did you expect? It's war. Like, they make such a huge deal of it. Like, it's some kind of sign that she's going evil. But it makes perfect sense with the situation everybody is in. It's not this wild out there thought. She killed her enemies in war that refused to bow down. I'm not saying it's right, I'm just saying that's the way it is. And people act like she just did it for the fun of it. That wasn't the case. And I think it's Tyrion who's just like, we don't do things like that. Yes, you do! You do! And then they find out that Cersei lied and she's not actually going to send them an army. And it's just like, what? How could Cersei lie? Like, the characters are just so freaking dumb by this point. Of course she was going to lie. Of course she was going to go back on her word. Anyone who knows Cersei, which these characters apparently do, would know that. But they're so freaking dumb here that it's as some kind of huge shock. And Cersei has this relationship with Euron who I just don't buy this for a second, and everything with Ewan here I just find to be awful. And then John finds the truth out about who he is, and I just felt nothing. So that's episode 1. Then we go to episode 2, and Jamie is at Winterfell. He's like, I want to help, and they're like, why should we trust you? And Brienne speaks in favor of him. And here's the thing about Jamie, because this baffles me, not just with the show, but with the fans. Because people say that Jamie's character was ruined in season 8, and I'll get to that. But Jamie was a great character in seasons 1 to 4, but ever since then, they've had no idea what to do with him or how to write him. And he hasn't become this good man that the show has led you to believe. You could say that maybe in season 4, despite still being flawed, but at this point, he's just so obviously not, he hasn't changed. But anyways, this episode is mainly the calm before the storm, and I like that in concept, but in execution, I just felt like it was just blatant fan service, and I found that nothing was earned. Brienne gets knighted, and I know people love this moment. I hated it because they're just like, well, why not? We have the time right now. I'll just knight you. But wouldn't it be better if she was knighted after like saving Daenerys' life or saving Jon's life or something like that? Like after the big fight, they is it Gendry that they make a big deal of? That they're like, oh, you will now be Lord Gendry or whatever. And I feel like maybe if Brienne got that moment and she was knighted instead, it would feel a lot more earned. And you just got characters talking with each other. There's this one scene where the Hound is talking to Arya, and Arya's just like, when have you fought for someone not for you, who isn't yourself? And he's just like, I fought for you, didn't I? And I loved that moment. But then they pour Lost, while someone else just enters the scene and the conversation ends. And I hate that. I hate when shows do that. It's lazy. Follow through on that. Be as authentic and as heartfelt as you can. And they ruined it. But then we get to episode 3. And actually, before I touch on that, I do want to say that there was just no build up to the big White Walkers talk. We see them bring down the wall at the end of season 7. There's one scene where we see that they're on their way. But that's it. Why not constantly go back to them, showing them getting closer and closer, show them wiping out villages along the way, killing people, building up the threat, because you just kind of forget about them, and there's just no real urgency. You know, there's even a scene in like episode 1 where Jon and Daenerys are just riding their dragons, because why not? And it's just like, there's this giant army coming, show some sort of give it some sort of weight. So I really hated that. But then we get to episode 3, and it's a terrible episode. I have so many issues, and I'll begin with the biggest one, is that there's so many scenes where you see all the main characters overwhelmed, on the verge of death. How are they going to get out of it? And they just get out of it by the camera cutting to someone else. And then when we go back to that character 20 minutes later, they're just fighting more White Walkers. They had to show how overwhelming of a threat these dead were, but they didn't know how to show the characters beat them, so they just used editing in the worst possible way, where it constantly took me out, and just take a shot every time it looks like everyone's about to die, then they just don't. And when you do that so many times, you just get rid of any bit of weight or stakes, because I'm just like, of course they're not going to die now. You know, you've diminished the stakes. And I think they had to kill some of the heavy haters here. Like, Theon dies in a very fitting way, like I said. Draw dies, who... I'll touch on that a bit. I actually don't like the fact that he dies in this episode. Lana Mormont dies, who I didn't really care for. But it's just like, you needed some of the bigger characters to feel it. I feel like either Jon, Bran, Sansa, or Arya should have died. Jaime could have died. Actually, if Jaime went out being a hero here, I'd be okay with that. Brienne could have died. Tyrion, I think, should have died. But no, just none of the big heavy hitters died. You know, the show begins, and like, anybody could die at any moment. But by this point, it just feels like the main characters have plot armor. So I don't like that. And on top of that, they build up the Waswaki for such a long time. This is the most wild, insane group of people to ever be against. They're unpredictable. And there's a shot where all their weapons are on fire. They go marching towards the White Walkers and just, they all die like that. And it makes for a very cool looking shot. But you've completely ruined them. Like the Dothraki just, is it the Dothraki or the Dothraki? My goodness. I think, I should know this. They both kind of sound right to me. But anyways, they actually wiped out an entire army for one cool look. Like, come on. And what, they just suddenly turn into idiots? They just suddenly all die like that? Meanwhile, all the Winterfell armies, people are surviving just fine? So you're really trying to tell me that the average Winterfell soldier is stronger than the Dothraki? Come on, come on. Like, there's only so much I can buy. I hated that. You did them a huge disservice, especially since they've been built up to since the beginning with Jason Momoa, Aquaman himself. And it really takes me off that they have all these catapults, and I think maybe it was used once, if that. Like, why? Like, wouldn't you use them throughout the entire battle? Like, for this big epic battle, they just had the good guys acting like complete idiots. And then Jon, who is like the guy who fights for his people, and Daenerys, they're just like, bye, and they hop in their dragons and fuck off. Like, you kidding me? They just left all their people to die for some dragon battle, which really was ugly and a terrible fight that you couldn't tell what was happening. But you're really going to do Jon Snow dirty like that? He just got up and left for the entire fight. Like, that's so out of character for him. And this episode's too long. You know, I like my big epic battles. I love Lord of the Rings, the Fourth Trilogy. I love Braveheart. I love the Battle of the Bastards here. I love the Blackwater fight. But for an hour and 20-minute long episode to be almost non-stop action, it started to feel really stale for me. There was a point where I'm just like, I'm kind of getting over this. How much is left? And there was still an hour left. There's only so much action that you can watch before you just grow numb to it, and that definitely happened for me here. And you just see the same exact stuff over and over again. Also, it's way too dark. There were so many moments where I couldn't tell what was happening. Some moments I couldn't see a thing, but I think the bigger problem, more than that, is just the fact that the camera's always moving. There's always people running in front of it, and there was just some things way too close to the camera where I just couldn't tell what was happening. It was kind of nauseating to watch at certain points. I don't understand why Bran would hide outside in the wide open. That makes zero sense to me. And then hiding the women and children in a crypt facing an army of the dead was just really stupid. I know that one's a bit nitpicky because the whole idea of like them coming through the walls and attacking them is kind of cool, but Tyrion's a complete coward here. And then the Night King, what a terrible waste of a villain. Like, he was built up to for so long, and you don't even see him fight anyone. He just looks at them and be like, dude, but why not show him fight Jon Snow, this epic fight between them, one-on-one? Why not do that? Like, he was built up to as Jon's enemy, and I just feel like we should have gotten that fight and just show how good of a fighter he is. And if you ask me how I think this episode should have ended, I think he gets to Bran and Jon Snow hops off his dragon there because he just flee there. And Theon and Jon fight the Night King together, and when it becomes clear they can't beat him, Theon sacrifices himself so then Jon could strike the final blow and kills the Night King. And I think that would have been a satisfying way where Theon sacrifices himself to save everyone. He's remembered well, people respect him in death, and Jon still got to kill the Night King. That would have been perfect for me. But instead, Arya just fucking teleports behind him. Like, there's a scene where she's in the library and it's trying to be like Jurassic Park in the kitchen, where like the zombies can hear her drip blood, but they can't hear her. None of like the hundreds in that area can hear her sneak up on the Night King. Give me a freaking break. When she jumps up in the air, I actually burst out laughing. And it's not just that, it's just the fact that this moment wasn't earned. Arya had nothing to do with the Night King. I know it's trying to be the finale of Arya's character, all that training went to this moment, but Arya's goal was always her list. So, if there was a big fight, I guess she could have killed the Night King, but looking at it narratively, it's just not satisfying. And you kill the Night King, everyone's dead just like that, and it's just, you've kind of turned this entire army into a joke. Like they're losing badly and that's all it took. I just didn't feel the weight of it. So I thought this episode was just awful. And it doesn't help that the next episode begins and we see the deaths, they say a few things, and then the next scene, everybody's laughing and having a good time. And you already kind of forget about the White Walkers and just like all that build up, all that weight just gone like that. It just felt like a minor obstacle to them. And it kind of takes me off that no one really properly grieves Theon. He kind of just gets forgotten. They did him dirty after he died. And like I get how they want to show the calm before the storm again, but come on, this is the last season. It's shortened up. Where's a bit of urgency? Like, let's get it going. Use that momentum and just keep it going. And they just don't do that. And I really hated that. Too much time doing nothing lessens the stakes, and I really hate how Gendry's like, I love you, Arya, and Arya rejects him. Like, before the fight, Arya goes onto him, has sex with him, and he clearly liked her, and then he's just like, I love you, I want to marry you. And she's just like, oh, I don't like you like that. It kind of makes me hate Arya in that one moment. It didn't sit right with me, and then Jon knows Daenerys is technically his aunt. Wait, so if he married Daenerys, would he be his own uncle? How would that work? I think, yeah, he would be his own uncle. That's... But he still makes up with her here. Like, he stops himself, but he still... it's gross. Jon was always seen to be better than this, and the fact that he gives into it and then doesn't too many times... and then Daenerys heals officially that Jon did die and come back to life, which was such a big part of season 7 and about her wanting to know the truth behind it, and she just doesn't react to it at all. And then Jon just being like, my queen. Every time he says my queen, I hate him more and more. And the truth is, I like everything that they're trying to do with Daenerys, with her insecurities and her messiah complex taking over and her going mad. It's a really fantastic idea, but it is just goes from 0 to 100 for it to have any bit of weight to it. It just feels so incredibly rushed. And then we also get this scene where Jon tells Sansa and Arya about who he is, and I hate the fact that they cut away there too. Like, show their reactions, show how they take it. Instead, they just cut away. They poured a lost again, and then Sansa tells this person, and soon everybody starts to know it, and it just spreads like wildfire. It's a bunch of gossip, and it just reminds me of like a CW high school show, so I really hated that. And like, Sansa just kind of betrays Jon like that, and then Tyrion's so dumb, he thinks Daenerys would be okay with it. And then we get this scene where they know Ewan has a fleet, and then in the next scene, or one of the next scenes, she's in the air with 2 of her dragons, knowing that Ewan is ill, and then she must have forgot because the one dragon goes down. And it's just like, if they get down just like that, it kind of, like, you built them up to so much, and now you feel nothing. It's just, really? Like, that took them down? Are you for real? And how did you not see his fleet? It's just, she's so dumb. And then for some reason they capture what's her name? Miss Sandal? Like, that was their big plan. How did they know to do that? I don't know. That doesn't really make sense. We get this scene with Braun, where he's just become an over-the-top caricature of himself. Jaime going back to Cersei is a lesson in how not to do character progression, because it's regression in every sense. And it plays it out like he's so in love and it's a good thing, but it's not. It's messed up. I really hate that. And in this episode, he actually has sex with Brienne, but it kind of feels like he took pity on her because he found out she was a virgin, and just what should have been a romantic moment that was earned felt like a moment acting out of pity. And what else? So Cersei gets a Missandei kill, and I felt nothing. I've never really cared about this character. She was good in season 3, but since then she's kind of gotten less and less interesting. But it's just like, why wouldn't Cersei kill them all right there? There's only a few of them. It's not like Cersei's known for her honor, and it would have been better if, at least if Missandei got killed, and then instantly Daenerys like attacks her, and she was acting out of rage for that moment. But too many pauses, just why go and then come back and do it? Like, just do it there. Carry that momentum, and they just don't do that. So then we get to episode 5, and like I said, I don't really care about Missandei dying. I didn't feel like Daenerys lost her closest friend or anything. So Daenerys just goes mad because she lost her. And mind you, she's lost a lot of people before, so it keeps piling up. And then she also gets upset that Jon won't have sex with her due to the fact they're family, and because she thinks that people want Jon to rule the Seven Kingdoms, and that just isn't enough for me to buy this sudden transformation. You take a show like Arcane, which, spoiler alert for Arcane, but in one moment, acting out of pure emotion, Vi strikes her sister and she cements the downfall of Piltover, and she cements her sister's fate, and you buy into it. And just nothing here has a fraction, even the slightest tiny bit, close to that level of character writing and weight. Like, Daenerys refused to partake in slavery. She hated the whole idea of arena fights. She locked her dragons up for an entire fucking year because they killed one innocent person. And now she's killing everyone. All these innocent people, left, right, and center. I just do not buy it for a single second. This is something that should be taught in film school, for how you have to own moments. You have to have some sort of weight. You have to buy character transformation, because otherwise the execution is completely unowned. And this is what happens when you go from B to Z. So that doesn't work. There's just no weight to anyone dying. And then the Waswaki and the Unsullied just decide to kill everyone too. Like, what the hell? Like, it's enough for one person, but just Grey Worm is upset, and now everyone's just going to kill all these innocent people. Like, they worked with Daenerys because she thought she was good, and it'd be great if there was conversation like, is she good? Maybe we should rethink this. But no, they just act like her army still, mindless slaves. And it would have been great to see some inner conflict in these people, but no, just everyone kills everyone. And the Dothraki come back. Didn't they all die? Like, we didn't see them after they died in episode 3. So did they just want to build up her army again, so they just magically brought a bunch of them back? That didn't work for me. And then we get to everything with Tyrion, and he just gets his best friend killed, makes him completely unlikable. Like, snitches get stitches, don't forget that. And then he lets Jaime go, he repays the favor, but how did he not see it coming that Daenerys would turn? Like, he's just a complete idiot by this point. He went from my favorite character on the show to one of my least favorites. Jaime dies here. There's just no arc. It's just wasted character. Him and Cersei's death was just lacking in every sense. And I see the defense of it online, and I disagree with it, that that Jaime dying with his sister is more of like a character study kind of way, and how, Cersei breaks down in her last moments. I still don't think it's a satisfying end to these characters at all. Cersei's not given one last character beat before she dies. It just kind of feels like she dies suddenly. And I hate how they play the romance as tragic and sad when really it's just disgusting. There's a fight between Euron and Jaime that has no build-up. There was no real conflict between them beforehand. And Daenerys destroys the entire fleet like that, but she couldn't one episode prior. It's just garbage writing. The only thing in this episode that I liked was, like I said earlier, Arya's last moments with the Hound. But I didn't really care for Arya's revenge plot here. It kind of feels forgotten by this point, and the Mountain and Hound fight was just really stupid. Like, he gets stabbed in the head and the Mountain is still alive. You're pushing it way too much. And then Jon just watches Varys gets killed, and he's still going, oh, she's still my queen. Like, this guy's just a complete idiot by this point. Like, I love the whole idea of these good guys fighting off against the bad guys, thinking they're in the right, but then the good guys start losing it a bit. They go power crazy and they end up getting thousands of innocent people killed. And when the dragon is destroying King's Landing, it should have so much weight to it, but it's just so unearned. The movie actually, I think, did this exact same thing, but a lot better. Mockingjay Part 2, The Hunger Games. That scene where Katniss is trying to get into the Capitol and all the women and children are going to the Capitol as well, and then the good guys strike back, getting lots of people killed, including Prim. Thematically, exact same thing as here, but done much more effectively in a much more earned manner where they do build to that. I know people don't like Mockingjay Part 2. I disagree with you. I think you're wrong, but yeah. Then we get to episode 6 where John just witnessed his queen kill lots of people, and he's just so unlikable because he's defending her every chance he gets, and it's just like you've destroyed this character in one season. He's just weak and pathetic now. And sure, he eventually kills her eventually, but it took way too long for him to get to that moment, and I just don't care about this romance that it had zero weight to me. It had zero emotion. It kind of reminds me of X-Men 3, where Wolverine is trying to get to Jean, and he goes like, I love you. And that even had more emotion than this show. He's just so dumb. Like, that one scene where he talks to Tyrion in the jail cell, he's so dumb that he makes Tyrion look like season 1 to 4 Tyrion by default, by comparison. I wish we got Sansa getting to confront Daenerys. I wish there was a discussion about the fact that if Bran can't have kids, if Jon's a Targaryen, and if Sansa, she's a woman, she'll take her husband's name, same as Arya if she ever does get married, that the Stark name is going to die. I wish they kind of contemplated on that a little bit. And the whole decision to make Bran king is just fucking stupid. Like, it is such a bullshit, unearned moment. Bran is one of the worst characters of this entire show. He's boring, he's flat, he contributes nothing. And also because he's become like this supernatural third eye raven, it just seems like such a downgrade to go into the position of a king. It's like if Superman wanted to become president of the United States. Like, aren't you above this? That's the way I take it. And the fact that he's just like, why do you think I came all this way? Made him seem like a smug, arrogant son of a bitch, so I really hate him. I kind of hate the fact that everyone kind of just forgets that Arya saved everyone. Her killing the Night King doesn't even have weight 3 episodes later. But anyways, the episode ends, Bran is king, his men are happy, you've got Tyrion, Sam, Bronn all working together, they're laughing, making jokes, making dick jokes of course, and all is forgiven. Sansa is Lord of the Winterfells, Arya travels, and Jon goes back to the Wall, which I absolutely hate. It's a real regression of his character. Yes, he never wanted the throne, but he never wanted to be Lord and Commander. He never wanted to be King of the North. His whole character is, because he doesn't want it, he's the best fit for it. And we don't get that here. My biggest problem with this ending, and one of my biggest issues with this season that nobody talks about, is that it's just too clean of an ending. It feels unauthentic to the world that they live in, to these characters, to Westeros. Ned and Robb died because they were honorable men. Robb married for love, Ned was a good man. And you can't get a happily ever after when you're like that. And if you want to know how I would end this show, I know people are going to disagree with me here and think that my take on how the show should have ended is much worse, but I'm going to stand by this. I think the whole idea of going from White Walkers to King's Landing was a mistake to the point where the White Walkers feel irrelevant. And I think this entire show should have ended with the fact that the different kingdoms couldn't reunite, couldn't work together to take on the White Walkers. They were focused on all these different thrones and power and all that. And then the White Walkers come to King's Landing and all these different kingdoms and just wipes everyone out. I know people probably think that's a stupid idea where everyone dies, but I think it's fitting for this show. How would you take down this enemy? You gotta give the White Walkers some sort of weight, and if they couldn't put aside the differences and the cost was everything, I think it kind of does encapsulate all of the show's themes. So people can disagree with me on that, but I think the show should have ended with literally everyone dying and the White Walkers just ravaging through all the kingdoms like a plague, and maybe a few characters survive and get on ships and all that, but Westeros is completely taken over and destroyed. I would have liked that. I feel like that's fitting for this show. I know people want the happy ending, but the happy ending doesn't stay with you. Last of Us 2, not a depressing ending. There's elements of joy to it, and Ellie putting aside her past. Arcane, season 1 at least. It ends on this really effective note, which was so well built up to, and it lingers with you, it stays with you, and I feel like this ending would have felt true to the show. But since we didn't get that ending, some things I would have done differently is that I think if they were going to get anyone to kill Daenerys, it should have been Jorah. I didn't care about the relationship between Jon and Daenerys, but Jorah has been built up to as loyal to the Queen the entire show, and for him to recognize how she's gone evil in the last few episodes and for him to be the one to kill her would have been a great moment. Like I said, Theon should have sacrificed himself and Jon strikes the final blow for the Night King. Brienne should have sacrificed herself to save one of the Starks, I think, in the Long Night. Jaime should have died at the Long Night, but if he does go to Cersei, he actually should have gone there to kill her himself. And then he dies by collapsing building, and how he goes down in legend as Kingslayer and the Queenslayer. Tyrion and Varys I actually think should have switched places. I think Tyrion should have been the one to die, and Varys is the one to survive. And Jon Snow should have obviously become king. Like, that's just common sense. And I do want to say that the humor in this show is absolutely atrocious. It is not funny. It's just embarrassing. The cast. Gwendolyn Christie does fine. I do kind of like what they do with her character, how she still honors Jaime after his death, but that's all she really ended up doing. Sophie Turner, I find this character to be underutilized and very boring now. Maisie Williams, I'm not a fan of the way they've written this character, but I still think she brings lots of likability to her. Kate Harington legitimately gives a really good performance, especially in the last episode, but he's given such shit writing, and I really hate the fact that he's a Targaryen just doesn't come into play. It's completely meaningless. It was wasted. John Bradley is boring. Alfie Allen is still really good. Gemma Reeland as Laura Greyjoy is fine. I just wish we saw her react to her brother's death. Isaac Hempstead as Bran is so unlikable. I hate him. Nikolai Coster-Waldau as Jaime is fine, but shit writing. Lena Headey, they do nothing with her pregnancy, and we never see her truly be evil as Queen. I hate her. Roy McKean is fine as a Hound. Peter Dinklage is really good in the last episode, but shit writing. Jerome Flynn is just a joke as Braun now. Cornelius Hale, bad. Ian Glenn, bad. And Emilia Clarke, there's only so much she can do. She's trying her best. I still like the music by Warren Dedraughty. There's decent visuals and production design. But this is a terribly paced and structured season. Every choice they make are bafflingly bad. It's lazy writing. The rumor is that the D&D, the writers behind this show, were just in a rush to get through it so they could get to Star Wars, and I don't know if that's true. Don't really know what they were thinking, but I do know that they weren't thinking well, because this season is just an embarrassing disaster. So much build-up throughout the entire show, just thrown away like that. So many character beats I can't wrap my head around. Just completely rushed, unearned disaster of a season. And I'm going to be a bit nice on it than you'd think I would be, because I do like the fact that C1 gets an appropriate farewell. I do like how they wrap up the Hound story. Yeah, that's as positive as I can get. So I'm going to go ahead and give Game of Thrones Season 8 it's either a 0.5 or a 1 out of 10. If I had to choose right now, I will go Game of Thrones Season 8, a 0.5 out of 10. Like, how could I not? How could I not? So much build-up just wasted like that I don't even care about the good things here, because they just wasted so much that whenever I rewatch this show, I will never watch this season again. I'll end it off at Season 4. It's just, what did you think of Season 8? I'm done. Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Stay tuned for some more videos soon. And Gavin, out.